Coming November 3rd, the COVID cure. The coronavirus ends then. You can mark it down. We won't need a vaccine. The treatment won't be hydroxychloroquine. And we won't need a test to know we don't have it. We'll just need a calendar. November 3rd, coronavirus washes away. Election day, of course. At that point, it loses its political usefulness. Because if President Trump wins, as I believe he will, even Democrats will know it's time to move on. That COVID, politically, is a dog. They'll have to find something else to try to run him out of town on. Now, hypothetically, if Joe wins, he won't. But imagine for a moment he does. The media will cease telling the COVID story like they are right now. It will all change. All those graphics, the charts, the music, the relentless pounding of the drum, none of it. It evaporates as a story very, very fast. And Dr. Fauci, he changes his tune. He won't dare disagree with Joe Biden. And if he does, the media will not take his side. Bottom line, if Joe wins, COVID-19 becomes old news. Now, there's plenty of precedents for this kind of thing, very recent and also long ago. And I'm not saying that COVID isn't real. It is, and it's serious. But it's the level of coverage and the constant assignment of blame that's artificial. Now, the homeless issue, remember that? It's real too. But have you ever noticed that sometimes the media tell us we have a homeless crisis in America, and then we don't hear about it for a while, and then it comes back, homelessness is surging. Homelessness just kind of comes and goes. This has been studied, and they found this out. Whenever a Republican becomes president, the problem suddenly gets much worse. And it is alleviated very suddenly when a Democrat becomes president. It arrived big time in the 1980s. Thousands of stories and the villain, Ronald Reagan. As Bernie Goldberg wrote in his now classic Bias, a CBS insider exposes how the media distort the news. When it came to Reagan, he was the typical arch-conservative, a politician who simply had no compassion for the homeless. As a matter of routine, they made it look as if the Reagan administration practically invented homelessness. A very convenient narrative, but simplistic, and overlooked the real culprits, drug and alcohol abuse. The media, though, too willing to believe that government programs were the be-all and end-all in curtailing homelessness. Homeless stories were a fixture of the evening news and newspapers basically every day until January of 1993, when, you guessed it, Bill Clinton arrives in Washington, D.C. Homelessness suddenly cured. Publications that did 50 to 100 stories a year on the issue, suddenly just down to 1 or 2, maybe. There wouldn't be a resurgence until George W. Bush gets sworn in January of 2001. It fits an easy-to-understand script that liberal journalists are eager to believe. Democrats stand for good. Republicans stand for the rich. And you may remember, speaking of W, that he was the war president, and he fashioned himself that way. And Obama, he was the very civilized and elegant peacemaker. Now, you have to look high and low for accurate stories like this, but they're out there that Obama actually dropped 10 times more bombs than Bush did. But that's not the story they wanted to tell. And they do have to tell a story. It's not about reporting facts and letting others decide. So, yeah, COVID goes away November 3rd, just like the Russian investigation went away when they exhausted that, just like Ukraine, just like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, when they lost their usefulness, when media can neither profit from a narrative or advance their agenda with it. It's dead. And their agenda is not journalism. The New York Times had a high-level defector 2 weeks ago. Their columnist, Barry Weiss, a centrist, maybe slightly conservative, quit because it was too toxic a place for her to work. Now, in her resignation letter, which is a doozy, she says, there is a new consensus that has emerged in the press, but perhaps, especially at this paper, the truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few, whose job is to inform everyone else. The paper of record is more and more the record of those living in a distant galaxy, one whose concerns are profoundly removed from the lives of most people. Now, did you know that reporters now sit in apartments in Brooklyn, New York, and cover the world half of the political reporters covering American politics live and work in Brooklyn, a borough of New York City. Now, sure, a lot of people are working remotely right now, but they've been doing that since before COVID. At one point, that was a scandal. It's an easy way to make up stories, and a New York Times reporter named Jason Blair was famously fired by the Times for making up stories as he sat in his apartment in Brooklyn. He just sat there and made stuff up. Huge scandal, but it turns out, in a way, Jason Blair was just ahead of his time. The Jason Blair playbook, the staying at home part, standard, covering world events without leaving the house. But a lot gets lost if you cover the news that way, because talking to people who are not powerful, people who are not famous, this is important to do. And it's been a long time that was a standard feature on the news.
I feel the world today is more aware of brotherhood than ever before.
And this is what makes a vital America.
I wondered if you could volunteer your opinion.
I have no opinion.
No opinion. Elite media have no interest in the lives of those who are not powerful or of those they cannot exploit. And that means they really can't understand the country they're covering, America. President Trump understands this country, though. And he's the first president not cut off from the people while he lives a pretty unique life in the White House. Now, Twitter helps. And try not to be one of those people, well, I like his policies, I just don't like the tweets. It helps him. He is inhaling culture this way. It works for him. He knows the pulse of this country better than anyone. And unlike lazy, sleepy, slow-mo Joe, he is crisscrossing the country, working very hard. He stands for interviews all the time in front of the press. This local reporter here, back at the White House a couple of weeks ago, Chris Wallace put him through the paces. And then just the other day, this guy Swan from Axios, gotcha question after gotcha question.
I have never discussed it with him, no. I would. I'd have no problem with it.
But you don't believe the intelligence. It's because you don't
to
believe the intelligence. That's why.
All right. A little contentious there, but here's the thing. He's getting more out of it than the reporter and the audience, actually. It's keeping him ready, primed. You think Joe Biden is learning anything about political combat right now? It's a struggle for him to walk. It's sad. His team, they think they're protecting him, but right now, in his life, in his basement, in that comfortable cocoon, he's getting weaker every day. Don't be surprised at all if they find a way to cancel the debate, because if it happens, it might be a bloodbath. Remember, COVID is real, but the hype is unreal. On November 3rd, it's back to reality, especially for Joe.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.